Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished and senior marketing and branding guru with a focus on the hospitality sector from Chicago, USA, Kimberly Erwin. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Kimberly is the principal of Lotus Marketing, which is the unique one-stop shop that collaborates with sales and marketing teams to deliver innovative hospitality, marketing strategies, thoughtful branding, ongoing digital support, results-driven social media, and public relations management. And Kimberly has worked with most major hospitality brands. So Kimberly, before we get into marketing, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Yes, I had a passion for travel when I was very small, and I just loved the spirit of hospitality, throwing parties, being able to make people feel special and welcome. And so hotels were always a natural fit. But I started right out of college just as a sales administrator for Hilton. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there weren't even computers. I was the only person that was in the sales office with a computer on my desk, and spent a lot of time making contracts in WordPerfect for those of us who are even around back then. But from there, I worked through all different various hotel and hospitality companies, companies such as MGM Mirage, the Mark Travel Corporation, Preferred Hotel Group. And prior to Lotus Marketing, I spent about 15 years with Marriott. Mm-hmm. And, the pandemic has an interesting impact on our world. Mm-hmm. And like most major brands, the field marketing organizations were just being furloughed left and right. And so my mission during COVID was, gosh, how in the world do we bring all this talent back to work? The hotels were cut off at their knees. They needed help. Yep. All these people were laid off. And so my business partner, April Likovich, and I started Lotus Marketing. During a world pandemic in hotel marketing, which many of us in the world thought we were crazy, which I can understand, but that's how it was born.
Fantastic. So let's now talk Lotus Marketing. Tell me about the scope of work you handle at Lotus Marketing.
Right. Well, Lotus Marketing is a full service agency, although we are not agency people. We are all hotel marketers. And so what happens in hotel marketing is it's become very complex. When you think back to, the early 90s when the title of director of sales and marketing at a hotel was born, that job was really just sales. And you might put an ad in a community news, paper, or, put a banner up or something. But, now you've got, the dynamics of search engine optimization and social media and paid media and, the digital footprint. And you've got, photography that's become very complex now with different types of drone shots and such. And so the role of a director of sales and marketing no longer can really manage all the facets of this complex hotel marketing world. And so what, has happened over time is that it's had to get more specialized. And so that is why a lot of those bigger brands, such as Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt, had such robust marketing infrastructure to be able to provide that level of expertise and resources to these hotels.
Fascinating. Yeah. And based on all the work that you've done in different hotels and now Lotus Marketing, what are some of the key elements of a successful hospitality marketing strategy?
Great question. There's a couple of components. I'd say let's tackle two for today. First and foremost is focus your marketing based on what your business goals are. Sometimes marketers and even just general people get so focused on doing things just because, and it's not laddering up to your business goals, things that really will make a difference. And so when you take a look at your business goals and you put together your sales plan, your marketing needs to support what that sales plan is. And so if you're 90% of your plan revolves around group segments, well, then you really probably shouldn't be focusing all your marketing, expenditures against that transient segment, for example. So, that would be number one. The second thing I would say is really hotel positioning is so important. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's basically not trying to be everything to everybody, right? So when you are a hotel, and if you are a flagged hotel, which would be in the case like a branded hotel, like a Hilton, a Sheraton, a Marriott, whatever, you already kind of have a brand, you have a brand, a promise, a brand positioning, but you have to localize that positioning. Because when you think about, let's pick on Marriott for a moment. A Marriott hotel, the box itself is going to be very different depending if it's a airport hotel, a city center hotel, a resort. So the actual physical facility is different. And what makes positioning even a little bit more complex is that the destination comes into play. So, if you're in Morocco or you're in Chicago, the offering and the programming is going to vary greatly. And so, if you attempt to try to be everything to everybody, you aren't going to succeed, because you want to be able to demand premium rates and really command that market share. And by doing so, you're really offering the right product at the right price to the right audience. And so by dissecting this term called hotel positioning, it's really just taking in that local interpretation of a flag brand, considering the concept. The concept will really dictate how a hotel will compete in a market, the variables of the destination, how the guest, reacts to the programming, and what the guest satisfaction scores. And so when you take a look at that big picture research, that hotel positioning really becomes that strategic lens, not just a marketing tool, but a strategic lens from which the hotel can make decisions.
Great response.
So those two things.
Fantastic. Thank you. And my other question to you, Kimberly, is what role does storytelling play in building a hospitality brand? And I remember when I just joined the company, India Tobacco, now it's called ITC. The first hotel was just been launched, and the whole campaign was driven on pillows, and it said, "Someday beautiful people will sleep on these pillows." So I wanted to get an understanding from you, how important is storytelling?
I think storytelling is important in any marketing role, right? Because as we engage, and you always hear the research of when someone's engaged in a story, they are more apt to buy, and you're able to drive conversions over if you're just spewing facts and benefits and features that really don't resonate. And so the story needs to come to life in the sales and marketing efforts, but it also has to come to play in the hotel activation. So when we talked about hotel positioning, where it's like, don't try to be everything to everybody, the story that is told through all the customer touch points on property has to mirror the story that sales and marketing are telling off property, because the content that is being shown on social media channels, for example, is a direct reflection of the experiences and touch points that the customer is going to have at the hotel. So all the stories have to say the same story for it to be effective. And so again, it's more about how do we paint the picture of what this experience is going to be, both on property and off property, and so that we're attracting that right audience again. And that consistency is so key, because there's so many channels now for marketers and salespeople alike to tell their story. And so all of those stories definitely need to be consistent.
Correct. And, in today's world, especially post the pandemic and the young customers who are coming to hotels, what are some of the big challenges and opportunities facing the hospitality industry, especially in view of the digitization of the world, where young people are looking for experiences based on reviews?
Yes, right. Keeping those reviews up is quite something. So your digital footprint in general is extremely complex. To your point, it's a global environment, and it's physically impossible for a single person to have a finger on all these outlets. There are definitely companies out there that manage digital footprints that will say, are the amenities, is the data right? Is your address right? Are your photos updated? And they are able to help automate a process that would be physically impossible to do manually. A lot of reasons behind it, but if you're updating websites, a lot of times those websites are populated by directories that, the minute you update the website, it's overwritten by the directory information anyway. So you would really never have a chance to keep up. Right. The other piece about the reviews is that's also a difficult thing to keep up. And there are companies out there that will actually just help hotels sponsor some of these reviews. And so depending on where the hotel pulls from. So if you are truly an international hotel and you've got a lot of booking channels overseas, you're probably going to need to engage in a company that's going to at least assist you with the basic responses and leave the more elevated responses to the managers of the hotels. If you're a hotel that's probably in the middle of nowhere, or at least a little bit more of a rural area that isn't necessarily pulling from such a vast footprint, you're probably able to manage that pretty much on the channels that are within your region. But the digital, representation in general is extremely important. And, one thing I will say is it's the photography. And it fascinates me when you think about all the things that marketers can do, and they get all fancy with proposals and virtual tours, and then you go on their website and their photos are horrendous. Photography, they think, oh, a photo is a photo, a picture is a bed, but how that room is photographed and staged makes all the difference. And when you think about it, photography will populate all those digital channels that we just talked about, all the sales channels we talked about, all the third-party channels and distribution channels we talked about. That photography is everything. And so unless you have really strong photography, I would say don't even bother investing anything else, because that photography will populate all of those digital channels and then some for you.
Well said. Great response. Thank you. And what kind of a role does Lotus Marketing play in supporting a lot of these digital marketing strategies?
Absolutely. So Lotus Marketing was built ground up as, again, being hotel marketers, we knew what resources we needed. So hotels need things fast. They need things cost effectively, but they also need people that truly understand all the different segments of their business. When you think of a big box, Starbucks or Target, it's pretty much people that are, in the area that walk in the door that want a certain service. Well, hotel people aren't local. You can't target that market because they're not from that market. So where are they coming from? And, you're not only dealing with corporate and group, you're dealing with leisure and transient. And so you've got, people that book direct, people that have come for a meeting, people that book through a third-party channel. And so it becomes very, very complex to try to manage how to put a marketing plan together. So Lotus partners with hotels, hotel ownership, hotel management companies, and just hotel companies in general to help wrangle that. So at the hotel level, we will partner with hotels to build that marketing plan, to say, okay, let's look at your business goals. How do we ladder up? And not only do we build that marketing plan, make budget recommendations, but then we work with the hotel to execute against that. So we serve as truly their marketing arm and an extension of their executive committee. At a bigger, broader level, let's say at a management company or a hotel company, we work at the enterprise level for solutions. So sometimes companies will be coming to us saying, we need a social media solve for our portfolio, or we really need our help for a meeting. We need to put content together. Can you help us build this? Or, we have a need administering marketing programs to all of our hotels. How can you write the programs and help us administer? And so, it becomes quickly blended between truly hotel marketing and being more of a consultative role. But we do offer full service. We've got everything from creative services to social media support to, digital support, so that we're able to have all the tools in the toolbox. But depending on what the hotel needs, sometimes they come to us just for an a la carte project. Like, can you just please get these hotel, websites up on my website? I can't get these pictures up on there. So they'll really come to us with very specific projects in some instances as well.
Very interesting. My next question to you is about, icons that most hotels have been using in the past. I remember we used to use big movie stars or big sports stars to market the hotel brand, but now the world seems to have been taken over, Kimberly, by influencers and micro-influencers.
Yes.
What role are these influencers playing in building hotel brands?
So, I think influencers early on were just so mystical, right? We didn't really know much about them, and everybody needed an influencer. And that goes back to my comment of, we did marketing just because it was marketing, and it wasn't necessarily laddering up to goals. And so the use of influencers can be very effective, but it needs to be strategically done in a manner that, again, really ladders up to goals. So let me give you some examples. Let's say we've got a hotel, a resort that is on a beautiful coast, and they're looking to expand the number of group segments that are coming to their hotel. And maybe they have an opportunity to reach very specific segments like a yoga retreat. And so they might want to then bring in an influencer that is specifically in yoga, who has a following in yoga, so that we can bring credibility and content in the space of yoga, so that you're able to then really provide some additional content and support around that particular segment. Now, if I just said, gosh, I just, want, like you were saying, I just need a celebrity that's got 1 million views, and we're going to have, this person stay at our hotel. Just because that person might have a following does not mean that it's going to ladder up to your business goals, especially depending on where the hotel is, what type of hotel it is. We've seen a lot of, hotels that have family travel, that have really those great mommy bloggers, that really are able to grab content, and influencers that are really able to, talk specifically to a segment. And that would be, again, very specific in shaping the content around a segment. And that, in my opinion, is the most influential approach to leveraging some of those influencers and potential celebrities as well.
Fascinating. Thank you. My next question to you is on technology, and you mentioned, and I remember when I started work 43 years ago, the only thing that you probably had was a manual typewriter,
right.
And, one of those rotary dial phones. But today, technology has changed the hospitality industry dramatically. And now with artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and augmented reality, and so on, marketing is changing. I'd love to get your perspective on how is this technology changing hospitality marketing?
Well, there's a lot of good that's coming in a lot of this technology. I know everyone's like, well, it doesn't replace the human experience. And you're absolutely right. That's why, everyone will go to a Zoom meeting, but will tell you, oh, an in-person meeting will, inevitably be much more effective.
Correct.
There's a reason for that. But we can absolutely supplement some of the ways that hospitality is leveraging all of the technology. So, for example, understanding the guest experience. So if you are a guest that's a frequent guest of a parent company, they can use your patterns to make your guest much more customized, much more personalized, and be able to give you the amenities and support that you need while you travel for the things that you like. So it can enhance your experience. Technology is really a game changer after COVID, when many of the meeting planners and people couldn't tour the facilities that they used to tour. And so bringing the property to people is now a reality with a lot of those virtual tours. And so we're making our marketing more effective because we're being able to bring some of that information and some of those experiences to people off property. We're also able to leverage some of that artificial intelligence to be able to help us create additional content and strategies based on trends or information that we already have. And so it really becomes where it's just augmenting what we already have, giving humans better information to do a better job at delivering great hospitality strategies and tactics.
Amazing. Now let's talk a little bit about the smaller chains. The big chains around the world have one particular perspective on building their brand. But you also mentioned you work with a lot of the smaller hotels and a lot of smaller chains. What are they doing differently to be able to establish their own brand, albeit in a smaller area that they work in?
So what's interesting about some of these smaller hotels is that they also have to play by the same rules of try not to be everything to everybody. You want to be very distinctive and very forged in what you are doing and very purposeful, so that your brand resonates with the audience that you're attempting to go after. So the branding is important. But also the service delivery. The impact of COVID has really changed the level of service, even in our luxury hotels, right? There's been such a departure of these seasoned, hospitality givers, right? These true stewards of hospitality that understood service and the art of hospitality. And now it's being kind of redefined by hourly employees that maybe don't have that same fundamental understanding of that. And so being able to differentiate on that is truly something that any hotel would be excited to have. And so the smaller brands and the independent hotels have an opportunity to do that, right? They're able to build that culture independently and build it in a manner that's consistent with their overall brand and their brand positioning. So again, we talked about that storytelling, being able to have people on, in the hotel that are truly stewards of that story, that truly represent what that brand's meaning. And so being able to craft that on-property experience, and again, telling that experience in a manner that's consistent to that experience is the key.
Well said. Great response. Thank you. My next question is on sustainability and the responsibility for the environment. And a lot of the young millennials and the Gen Zs are now very focused on how brands are responding to the environment.
Yes.
I'd like to get your perspective on how hotels or hotel brands managing sustainability, environment, and other such factors.
Absolutely. Well, every business has an environmental responsibility, or there won't be a world for us to enjoy. And I think from a travel perspective, it's important because the whole point of travel is being able to experience these destinations. And so the hotels must be responsible in their approaches to their local communities and their destinations to be able to bring people back. Some hotels do it better than others, right? Obviously, the ones that are in the destinations with a lot of the ecotourism innately have come forth with that. But we're noticing, everything from ground up construction with all the LEED certifications and being able to be very, efficient with their builds and their job sites, and being able to put in products that enable it to be much more energy efficient, comes with the actual construction. But then we're finding hotel operations are also becoming much more sustainable in their procedures, reducing waste. You'll notice the towel, phase where now, you're seeing, towels not being washed every single time in every, instance. And you're seeing things like some of those larger amenities, so soaps and containers instead of the small bottles that continually get wasted, and those bars of soap. I think nothing gets me more agitated when you have a bar of soap at the sink and a bar of soap at the tub, and people open them both, and it's like, couldn't you just share the soap? But apparently not. So so I think there's just initiatives all over, and then across the food and beverage industry as well. Within our hotels are also very focused on food waste, organic sustainability in terms of trying to support local farmers and less waste in transporting a lot of those goods and services. And so it's it's definitely a holistic effort across the entire facility, for sure.
Fascinating. So Kimberly, I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is that for someone who's seen hospitality marketing evolve over the years, what do you envision as the future of hospitality marketing and branding? And what kind of innovations do you hope to see?
Well, I'm introduced to get back to hospitality, what the genuine purpose of hotels is for. And there's nothing more exciting about what all great can happen in a hotel. When you think about a hotel, you have effective meetings, you have weddings and celebrations, you have family reunions, you have sports teams. And so when you think about the memories that hotels play a part in, and being able to really give back to the spirit of humanity, I hope that the innovations continue to lend itself to facilitating that. So as we talked about how technology can help people be better stewards of hospitality, that the hotels themselves enable people to do what they need to do in a hotel to create those memories. So greater pool deck areas for kids to play on, better golf courses to play on, just better and, food and beverage experiences. And so, I would think that as the hotel industry continues to evolve, the hotels that are going to be most successful are those hotels that really can differentiate in that space of hospitality and delivering upon that brand promise of what they, have set out to be. In terms of technology, it's going to be interesting because I think we're going to continue to leverage more and more technology to make that experience happen, as well as just to help to automate the experience so that there's not as many, manual processes in the entire industry, whether it's marketing, being able to make it more efficient, or even in the guest service experience. Yeah.
Very interesting. And my last question to Kimberly, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. A lot of them are very, very young, aspiring people from around the world. What would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers to take back from your journey and from our conversation on the subject of hospitality marketing?
The three lessons that we have in terms of taking it away.
Mhm.
Well, I would say three things. One, I would say stay focused on your hotel positioning, right? Be true to who you are. Don't try to be everything to everybody, and make sure that you lend yourself to really delivering upon that promise, because that is the best way to drive premium rates and command market share. The second would be supporting the fundamentals. Again, don't try to go out there with all this, sassy marketing if you don't have some of your fundamental marketing tactics secure, whether it be photography, whether it be your website, whether it be, some of your search engine optimization. And lastly, make sure you've got the right marketing resources deployed. If you've got a hotel that is a big group hotel and the only marketing resource you have is in social media, you might not really have your marketing goals aligned with the resources that you have. And so I think it's important to make sure that is also, a very big piece of that. And because those resources will do everything from tell you what you should be spending in marketing to the vehicles that you should be investing in. And so without that strategic direction, your marketing is not going to be nearly as effective in this complex, hotel marketing world that it's become.
Wonderful. And on that note, Kimberly, and your three amazing lessons: stay focused on who you are, support your fundamentals, which means get all your infrastructure right. And third one you said, which is so powerful, get the right marketing resource. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey. Thank you for speaking to me about Lotus Marketing and all the great work you're doing for so many different hospitality brands. Thank you also for talking to me at such length about different aspects of hospitality marketing and branding. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.